County Health, Human Services, and Aging Committee meeting is now called to order. Chrissy, would you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Here. Ms. Brown. Here. Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron is absent. Mr. Miller. Here. We have a quorum.
All right. Chrissy, has anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in for public comment related to the agenda.
Okay. Can we have a motion for the approval of the minutes from the August 3rd, 2016 meeting? Moved by Councilman Miller, seconded by Councilwoman Brown. All in favor say aye. Aye. Our minutes are approved. We have one item on our agenda today. And Chrissy, if you would read this resolution into the record.
Resolution 2016-0144, authorizing a contract with Emerald Development and Economic Network Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $971,262 for administration of the fiscal year 2015 Shelter Plus Care sponsor-based rental assistance program in connection with the HEART Act Homeless Assistance Grant Program for the period 9/1/2016 through 8/31/2017.
And Director, if you would speak to this item.
Oh, good afternoon. Ruth Gillette, Office of Homeless Services. This is a contract that is funded 100% through federal funding awarded to Cuyahoga County through the 2015 Homeless Assistance Grant Competition. It is renewal funding for a Shelter Plus Care grant award. This is actually combining three separate awards into one, which is something I know Council has asked, why don't they do this? This is one situation where they were able to combine the three. It provides funding for over 150 rental units that 2/3 of which serve chronically homeless individuals at the Housing First Initiative sites, which some of you are familiar with. I think all of you are familiar with. Some of the units at Liberty, which is on St. Clair at East 110th, Buckeye Project, Greenbridge has some units that are subsidized through this grant. And then there are some scattered site properties that are also subsidized. Jen Fleiderer, who's with Eden, is here if you have any specific program questions that I'm not able to answer.
All right, are there any questions from the committee? Councilwoman?
Through the chair to the director, Gillette, the rental payments amounts are different for each site?
Through the chair to Councilman Conwell. So the scattered sites are units in the community that are privately owned, and so those are pegged to the fair market rents in those areas, just like CMHA does with their Housing Choice Voucher program. And then for the Housing First Initiative sites, those rents are also set by HUD through a fair market rent calculation for a unit size. So it's capped at a certain amount.
So there's no way to negotiate that where we could be across the board depending where the unit is located?
To the chair, Councilman Conwell, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to verify that this rental assistance program will be able to assist the single individuals. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Brown, these grants, I'm just checking my list here, and I might have to ask Jen Fleiderer about that. I believe that these are all targeted to single adults.
Hello, Jen Fleider from Eden. Yes, all of these units are single units.
And just to enlarge on that, initially, the chronic homeless permanent supportive housing project was targeted to single adults because that population makes up close to 100% of the chronic homeless population, and the goal is to, end chronic homelessness, and get everyone off the street into housing.
And what is the criteria to be determined or as chronically homeless? What is that?
Through the chair to Councilman Brown, the Department of Housing and Urban Development has defined chronic homelessness as 3 episodes of homelessness within 4 years, totaling at least 1 year, plus a severe and ongoing disability. And then within those 2 areas of criteria, communities have to assess the folks who meet those criteria and develop a priority list and serve those individuals and families who have been homeless the longest, so they have the longest chronicity and have the highest barriers to housing. So let's say I've been homeless for 3 years, but Jen has been homeless for 5 years. And let's say we both have mental health issues, but she has a more debilitating kind of situation, has been hospitalized more, and there was only one PSH voucher. The voucher would go to Jen. So there's not enough resources for everyone, and so we have to prioritize even within the categories of, need.
So it's up to us to prioritize who will and qualify or does not receive the vouchers. It's not. It's a referral, basically. Would you say that?
Right. So, to the chair, to Councilman Brown. So, HUD has published a notice on prioritization of permanent supportive housing, and our community has adopted that through the Office of Homeless Services Advisory Board. But then the implementation of that is really administered through coordinated entry, and so. The community, through referrals from caseworkers and street outreach workers, a list is developed, and then each name on that list is given a score based on the criteria that I just described. And so when a unit becomes available in one of the projects, or if we, for example, this fall, a new project is going to open at 8301 Detroit, there's a community process, a group, public meeting of caseworkers and outreach workers and Eden and other nonprofit housing providers that meets every other week and looks at available units and who's on the list, and they try to match people up. So oftentimes what happens is the people that are highest on the list may not be either willing to go into housing, they may be on the street or in the shelter, or they may be in jail, or they may not be able to be found. And in those cases, then we go to the next name on the list. So it's a balance because we want to make sure that we're serving the highest need individuals, but we also don't want to leave units empty. So but we don't take someone off the list. So let's say I'm number 3 and they can't find me, they'll go down to number 4, but my name stays on the list.
And for how long?
Well, generally speaking, it'll stay there until I either get housing or they know that I've gotten housing through some other venue, because all of the people on that list are really known in the system. They're known through the PATH outreach workers or through the VA, or through the shelter workers that are doing referrals.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So all those who receive this subsidized housing, they are already part of the system as the intake point when they're in the homeless shelter,
Right.
one of the homeless shelters.
To the chair. So that's sort of the reason we're so supportive in and nationally, the notion of having a coordinated entry is so important, because when you are entered into coordinated entry, that's the sort of start date of how we can document homelessness. Now, let's say I've been living on the street, I never went to the shelter. We can still create the documentation through street outreach workers' testimony that they've been serving me at the corner of West 25th and Detroit for the last 3 years. So that, but then that will be documented in the system. When programs are audited by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, they require that we are able to provide the documentation that we are serving the highest need people, and they look to what's known as the Homeless Management Information System. They look to those records to see that that person was in the system and the date, and that there is documentation. So, I, like what had been happening a lot was that if I was someone who was homeless and had mental health issues, but I had a really good social worker, case manager, and he or she came to the meeting and really advocated for me, I might have gotten a unit before the next person, But so now it's really very much sort of, it's quantified, but also qualitative, but really the idea is to serve the highest need, as opposed to the person that has the loudest advocate, if you will.
You mentioned at least half a dozen locations where the subsidy is being provided, and you described it as being connected to fair market value. Can you give me a sense, though, what is, in dollar amounts, what is the fair market value for maybe the lowest or the
I'm
highest?
going to ask Jen to answer that.
Okay.
So the units that are the low-income housing tax credit properties are efficiencies, and that fair market rate is 603. That's including utilities. So the clients in those buildings don't have any utility responsibility. So the total rent is 603. That's the fair market rent.
So they pay $603 a month.
That's the fair market rate. So they pay based on what their income is. So if they have zero income, then their subsidy is 100% of the 603.
And if they have some income, they pay what percentage of their
They
income?
pay 30% of their income towards the rent.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman?
Through the chair to Ruth Gillette, or whoever can answer, I like to think outside the box. Is it possible that, since we're limited on resources, that we could actually share apartments for 2 individuals? Can we start thinking in that? So if you're paying a 603 total subsidy, of course, matching up women or men that would be in agreement with this, but putting them both in, and then you're utilizing one apartment for that one subsidy. I've been thinking about this for a while, so I'm just wondering if there's any federal hang-ups or anything like that, but maybe we should think about things of that nature to kind of capitalize on the units. I mean, I know they're already sharing in the homeless shelters or where they are, but there's a camaraderie, and there are people that might be willing to do that. So is that something possible that we could look at?
So with this particular grant, the sponsor-based rental assistance, most of the buildings that we are subsidizing with this grant are efficiency units. So of course, in that scenario, that wouldn't work, but that is something we've been talking about with our scattered site vouchers and with our new rapid rehousing grant, possibly matching people up so that when their housing assistance ends or their subsidy ends, it's easier for them to sustain the housing because they're sharing that rent burden and utility burden.
Okay, and how close are we to that? When you mentioned scattered site, first, might not be the first time that I heard it, but it's kind of new to my ears today. So what is scattered site?
I'm sorry, I'm just talking about the properties that are rented out by independent landlords in the community that aren't owned by a nonprofit.
Okay. So how close are we to to this possibility?
Well, our new bonus rapid rehousing grant is starting in a few months, so we're just kind of in the development timeframe of kind of seeing how that's going to work as far as the lease agreement goes. Are landlords willing to allow clients to move in and have separate lease agreements? So we're just kind of approaching that idea. So hopefully within the next year, we'll be able to initialize that.
And when we talk about private owners, is that an abundance of housing? You know, are people usually shied away for the kind of population that we're trying to put into their properties?
At times, however, we have a solid landlord base of landlords that we've been using for quite a while. So we, have landlords that we know when they have openings, they will contact us, let us know. They know that the units will be filled quickly and that they're going to get their rent payments timely. So we have a large landlord base. However, we're always trying to expand that landlord base through a community housing agent position that we recently received. The role of that position is outreaching landlords, going out into the community and explaining what the program is and educating new landlords to kind of bring them in, so we kind of have a new housing stock that we can put people in as well.
I'd like you guys to keep me in this committee into, the progress on that. I think that would be a great way to really capitalize on our resources. Thank you.
How many landlords do you have?
Right now, we have around 3,000 landlords.
Okay, Councilman Miller?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Gillette, how many people do we have on this list that are waiting for housing?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller, I believe that the prioritization list is over 200 names.
And what's the total number of units that we're currently subsidizing?
So the total number, so the prioritization list is specifically for chronically homeless individuals. And we are currently subsidizing, I believe, about 620 units specifically for chronic homeless individuals through the Housing First initiative. So the goal had been to create 1,200 permanent supportive housing units targeted to chronically homeless. With the project that's opening at 8301, that will add 60 units. And then there's a project that's going to break ground at Harvard and Miles. That's going to be another 66 units, and that's going to be in the fall. I believe that's going to break ground. And then a new project was just approved in June, Greenbridge 2, and that will be another 60 units, I believe. So we're continuing to develop the units to meet the demand, and so the idea would be that we would have no names on that chronic homeless list, or if we did, we always will, that they would be able to be housed through people moving out of the units, and so that they would no longer be sitting in shelter.
So those three projects would bring us up to 800, is that correct?
I'll defer to your math skills. So.
Okay. Ms. Flatter, you mentioned there were 3,000 landlords. Jive for me, the 620 housing units and with additional units using Councilman's math, and the 3,000 landlords are somewhat
So the 620 units that are, most of those that are chronically homeless, those are sponsor-based units that are owned by a nonprofit. The landlords that I was referring to are landlords in the community that we have what we call tenant-based rental assistance vouchers. So we have a client that can find a unit within Cuyahoga County, approach a landlord who's willing to accept the subsidy, and that's where that landlord-based number comes from.
If I could just clarify, so I was responding specifically to, so you've got the permanent supportive housing subsidies targeted to chronic homeless, and then we have permanent supportive housing subsidies for non-chronic homeless. And so those would be individuals who still, we're still trying to prioritize within that group so that we're serving the highest need, but they do not have to meet HUD's definition of chronic homeless. And so that's where I know you're familiar with the $10 million grant that we've come before you. Those are all scattered site and serve a large number of families and other and single adults who are, who have been homeless, who have disabilities, so they meet the criteria for that long-term subsidy. So.
Do you have a sense of what the, since you have to prioritize, a sense of what the universe is of those who have a need?
To the chair, so the county and the city both are required to submit a plan to the Department of Housing and Urban Development every 5 years and then update it annually, called the Consolidated Plan. And that plan really describes all the needs, housing needs in the community. So I would have to check the plan to see what those tallies are. But I think, if you looked, I know that they both look at, they look at sort of the need for affordable housing in general. They look at the need for subsidized housing for persons with disabilities and then other underserved populations. And so it's really a categorization and tally of what the affordable housing needs are in our community. And generally speaking, if you just look at rent burdens, we know that a significant portion of our community is paying more than 50% of their income for rent, and so would benefit from a subsidy. It's a much bigger issue than just people that are homeless. We can say, there's 250 chronically homeless people, but there are thousands of people in our community who are working, who are not getting paid enough, or who are working part-time jobs, who are struggling to remain stably housed. So it's a bigger issue than just this.
Okay. Do you have a need for or a capacity to accept more landlords?
Yes, we're always looking for new landlords and, different areas. People are always, looking for subsidy to move into the suburbs, cities outside of Cleveland. So we're always looking for new landlords to introduce them to our program, educate them about our program. We can always add more.
Okay. Give us a sense as we go to our community meetings, and give us a sense of what you would be looking for in potential landlords.
Every month we're usually adding around 10 to 15 new vouchers, and then every month we have probably between 30 and 50 people who have a subsidy already that are moving. So we're looking for landlords all the time. It's always important for us to have landlords who will accept people with felonies. That's always very difficult to find. Landlords who will accept people who have a sex offense. So those are the people that we're kind of concentrating on right now finding, because it's very difficult to house those clients as we receive them.
Mm-hmm. And they would simply contact Eden?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the phone number?
It's 216-961-9690, and our community housing agent is Brittany Davis, and once they get linked up with her, she can add them to our units available list and spread the word to all of our clients who are looking for housing that the unit's available.
Any further questions from the committee? Councilman Schron.
You indicated that there were some folks who did not accept the voucher, and what would be their reasoning why, and how often does that happen?
So landlords will not accept a voucher if they run a criminal background and their selection plan says that they can't accept someone with a certain criminal history or someone with a sex offense. Sometimes landlords will, do a credit check. Someone may have evictions in their past on their history. So, based on the history and some of the barriers of our clients, sometimes landlords will not accept them.
So even though they're being subsidized to a portion, they believe that the risk of collecting the rest of the rent is suspect, is what they're doing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and some landlords have had clients in the past that they haven't had a good relationship with. So if they have, hear the word voucher or Eden, sometimes that's an automatic turn off to them. If they've had a client in the past that, left the unit in a way that they didn't like or something like that. So.
Is the mere voucher a reason that people have chosen not to rent to somebody if they come in with a voucher? Is that part of a problem?
Sometimes I think there's, a misrepresentation of someone with a voucher and, what they may bring to the table. So at times I think that can be a deterrent to landlords. But, we're trying to work with landlords and educate them on the good things about having someone with a voucher, that they're going to get paid regularly, that there's someone else that they can contact, either a case manager or someone at Eden, that if they have a problem, they can contact us. While they have someone else with a voucher or without a voucher, they might not have that, third party to intervene.
Is there a maximum percentage of the rent that the voucher can cover?
So when a unit is submitted with a rent amount, we initially do a rent determination to determine if the rent amount is reasonable or not. If it's not reasonable, then we'll negotiate that with the landlord. But if they don't accept the amount that we are offering, then the tenant has to find something else. We don't just subsidize a percentage of it.
Okay, but, I mean, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how much, to use a business term, how much is the landlord on the hook for if the person has a credit problem and the landlord looks at it and says, I have a voucher that's going to cover X percent. Is there a maximum percent that can be designed in our program?
The voucher will pay up to 100%.
Oh, okay.
It's based on the client's income. So it's not negotiable in that sense. So if I'm getting $600 a month for disability and the rent's $603, I would still have to pay 30% of my $600 toward the rent.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So
That's the HUD, requirement.
All right.
Yeah.
So the maximum that would be 70%. Is that what you're saying?
If I have no income, the voucher pays 100%. Okay.
And why would a landlord have a problem with that if they're going to get paid from the county on a 100% basis? Assuming we're not talking about the sex offender or the felon, maybe perhaps they have a determination against that. But from a credit standpoint, I mean, it's the county's good faith and credit that's standing behind it.
If at any time someone gains income while they're on the program, then they would have a percentage of the rent that they have to pay. So it may not be that Eden is subsidizing 100% of the rent forever. Eventually, hopefully, they will have a portion that they have to contribute as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think, the reality is that, in some communities and, some landlords really aren't that interested in, supporting lower income rental markets. They want, and so it's kind of a code that's still acceptable to say they won't take, Section 8 or, something like that is a reality.
All right,
But-
thank you.
Yeah.
And this is not Section 8, though. This is
No,
obviously.
it's the same,
Concept.
it's a federal subsidy that, right? Jen, I wondered if you have a landlord packet that you could send to council so that they can see what is being provided to the landlords, what you're looking for. Okay.
is the goal ultimately to help them transition into their own housing? And if so, what is your success rate in that?
To the chair, the goal is absolutely to help people transition to independence. Remembering that a criteria is that an individual has a disability. However, we've built in incentives over the year to encourage people to either go back to school or begin to work, to reduce the amount of subsidy that the program is paying, which enables us to help more people, and also because that's the better thing for the individual. And I don't know, you have the percentages of people who've made that shift.
Yeah, we do have clients that reach self-sufficiency and are able to pay full rent on their own. So I would say that probably 5% of our clients reach self-sufficiency. Most of our clients are on Social Security or a steady income base, where if you're receiving $753 a month, without any additional income, they won't be able to sustain housing on their own. But we do have programs and incentives, like Ruth said, for people to become employed, and we do have some that reach that point where they can pay 100% of their rent.
Any further questions from the committee? Councilwoman?
Through the chair to Ruth Gillette, the Green Bridge 2, is that going to be built right next to 1 or in close proximity?
To the chair, to Councilman Conwell, yes.
Okay.
It will be bridged. The buildings will be bridged.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the programming will be the same?
Correct. And there will be, cost savings because they'll be able to, share some of the facility management and case management services.
Okay. I wonder if we have space for a 3. I'm
I don't know.
looking, because that's next question would be the rent subsidized participants that are chronically homeless. Is there a criteria that they need to meet every month to keep getting that subsidy?
They have to be recertified annually, so they have to bring us their income documentation, verify who's in their household, and sign off on our policies annually. They have to have an inspection annually, and if any time their income changes in the intermittent, they have to report that within 14 days. But there isn't anything on the subsidy end that they have to do every month, other than abide by their lease agreement, stay in compliance with the program rules. But the two main things they have to do are recertify annually and complete their inspection annually.
So I was just wondering, since some of them have mental health issues, are they required to keep up with their doctor and things of that nature on that aspect?
Right, so every year that's a conversation that the eligibility specialist has with the client, referring to last year who they may have been linked with, verifying if they're still linked with that person, and if not, asking follow-up questions like, do you need to be linked with someone, and then giving them that contact information to get relinked if they need to. We also, have a lot of callers that contact us, neighbors, landlords. If there's an issue or something happens, they oftentimes contact us to just let us know, and then we can reach out to the client and ask those questions again. Do you need someone to come out and help you? Do you need to be linked with case management? So that anytime other than their annual recertification, we can get those clients relinked as well.
Because I know just one particular case. Sometimes they have issues in their apartment and they're not maintaining it. Is that on us to, when the landlord reaches out to us to call if they're off their meds and they're destroying property? Is it up to Eden to go out and straighten that out, or how's that work?
We have stability specialists on staff that we can send out into the field to kind of see what's going on, to mediate between landlord-tenant issues. And in most cases, they can resolve the situation or link them with case management. So yes, if you hear of things in the community, let us know and we can get that person linked up with a stability specialist that can reach out to them.
And my last question would be, what was the title of Miss Brittany Davis?
She's the community housing agent.
And she's at Eden, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Through the chair to the council committee, I just want to point out that this grant only pays for the rent subsidies, it pays for the housing inspection costs and for cutting the checks. The housing stability position was one that Eden and the community recognized was really needed. And so we, have pursued other funding to be able to have that position at Eden. United Way provided one-time funding to get the position started. And I believe now that, is it Sisters of Charity Foundation?
United Way has renewed that.
Oh, yay, United Way renewed it. So anyway, it's a really important position because it is a higher risk population, and it is an important incentive for landlords to know that they have someone that they can call.
And just so I'm clear, United Way pays for, you're referring to Brittany Davis's position?
No,
They initially did, however, we're
bless you.
looking for other funding sources to keep that position going after the grant ends in October. For the stability specialist, that's two different positions. Those are funded through the United Way mostly, but we have to get other funding to sustain those positions as well because they're not funded at 100%.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Miller?
Given that this grant period starts on 9/1/2016, which is before the next meeting of this council, are you requesting passage under second reading suspension?
through the chair to Councilman Miller, yes, please.
I would make a motion that we recommend passage under second reading suspension.
Moved and seconded. I have another question. You mentioned the three funding sources early on, Ruth. Repeat those for me again. You said this was a renewal funding, but what were the three funding sources?
Oh, it's 100% from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's the Homeless Assistance Grant competition. We applied for this funding in 2015, and it arrives in 2016, but it's 2015 money. It's all HUD.
So
She stated that, you did state that there was three combined. I
Oh,
think
there were
that's what
three
the chair-
grants that were combined
Right,
into
that's
one,
what the
but it
chair-
was all HUD money.
okay.
Yeah, there were three that one started now, one started in October, and one started in December, and so they combined them all into one.
Okay. If there are no further questions, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Legislation is passed. Thank you. Okay. Is there any miscellaneous business from any on the committee? Excellent. Chrissy, has anyone signed in for comment unrelated?
Yes, Ms. Liu. And I'd like the record to reflect that Mr. Schron is in attendance.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The resolution we just had, that one is a very needed help. As Council Lady Conwell also did a very good job for us. She got the money for us, for the women's shelter to increase beds. Unfortunately, I think you all remember that the flood, Sunday before Memorial Day, that one destroyed hot water tank, the newly installed hot water tank, plus lots of mattresses also ruined in the same event. The problem here is chronic homeless is one thing, but the homeless families are another big issue. Doesn't matter they are chronic or not. There are children involved, and the situation is not less critical. Last week, basically the whole week, not only the family shelters were full, the overflows for them full, the overflow full. So now they were forced to put the families back to the single adult shelters. And unfortunately, the single population also increased. It's about 190, 200 people with 160 some beds plus the remaining mattress. We try to keep them in good condition. But still, when you already have almost 200 or about 200 people in that location, then you also have to accommodate homeless families. That was really hard. We had some good staff. They really worked very well, tried to accommodate both kind of situations. Of course, we still have bad ones. They were just doing nothing as usual. But in this situation, I think county should really check on two things. One is kind of related to the resolution. Lots of times people got a voucher, but they cannot find a private landlord accepting them because there's no law saying they have to accept, especially it's a government voucher. It's not somebody, doing it on their own. So the money is guaranteed there. The government will have this money to pay you, but there's no law requiring all the landlords to participate or to even accept any kind of voucher. Doesn't matter issued by CMHA, Eden, or any other entities. So this is one big problem. Some people got a voucher, they couldn't find the location in time. The voucher could be expired too. Some of the voucher actually has an expiration date. And the other thing is, for example, the women's shelter, 2100, even North Point, we still have this food poisoning situations. And I actually worry during this last week, the family with the little children staying at a shelter, they had to eat too, And I hope nothing happened to them because our food situation is still not stable. Thank you very much.
Chris, is anyone else signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Could we reserve the right to ask Director Gillette? I didn't know the vouchers expired. Could we ask her?
If you'd like to respond, Director?
To the chair, to Councilman Conwell. So the scattered site vouchers that are through Shelter Plus Care don't expire. I mean, CMHA has policies related to, they offer 3 different public housing sites, for example, and you have to choose one or your name goes back down. And I think on the housing choice voucher, if you don't use it within a certain number of days, that will expire. But for the rapid rehousing, which is a short-term subsidy for families to leave shelter, the families, when they apply for rapid rehousing, are told that they have 30 days or 45 days, 30 days to find a unit. And they're also provided a housing locator to help them find a unit. And the reason that, but people are not, they don't lose the voucher after 30 days. I mean, the idea is to just have an incentive to families to go out and look and, become engaged in finding a place to live. So the goal in the family shelter system is not to make people homeless again, it's to get them into housing as quickly as possible. We didn't used to have people weren't told initially, like, you have 30 days, and families were like staying in shelter for 60 days, 80 days, 90 days. And so it was an attempt to try to encourage people to move on so that we don't have to house families in overflow. I mean, it's the metric of moving people more quickly so that as people appear, you have a space for them in the shelter. So I know it's a long answer, but technically, no. I mean, we're not interested in making people homeless. We're trying to help them get housing, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right. Any other speakers?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, if nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is adjourned.